Get the Intel, the podcast meant for those of us trying to find out what the hell is going on in the field. Here we discuss tools, techniques, and approaches that you can implement to streamline operations and let you focus on your craft.
Hello, Chad Gill here. I am the host of the Get the Intel podcast, where I talk with leaders in contracting, management, and really anyone helping us do business better. This episode is brought to you by Laminin Coaching. Laminin is a business coaching company with a focus on contractors in and around construction. We not only help with proposing solutions and methods, but we implement them in your business as well. After all, good ideas are not useful until they're implemented. So if you're ready to elevate your business, visit us at laminincoach.com to see our full range of services. And joining me today is Scott Jolly. With over 2 decades of experience in the real estate and construction industry, Scott stands as a seasoned professional with a national footprint spanning 15 states. Over the last 14 years, Scott has particularly distinguished himself in the commercial sector, showcasing a blend of expertise and innovation that has set him apart. Notably, for the last 8 years, his company, Site Consulting Specialist, has strategically directed its efforts towards larger capital projects on a nationwide scale. His impressive track record reflects a commitment to excellence and a keen ability to navigate the complexities of the industry, positioning him as a leader in the field. Scott, thanks for coming on, and definitely excited to hear from you. Coming from just outside of Lake Tahoe, so I'm a little jealous of your location. I'll try not to let that kind of lead in too much on our conversation, though.
Right on. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, kind of tell kind of how you got into the consulting side, or you were only contracting side before, and you moved to this direction. Or is that always the goal?
No, it wasn't always the goal. I've always been an entrepreneur. Started my first companies in my 20s before the last financial crisis. And so had a family friend that introduced me to a guy that owned a paving company in Southern California. So moved down there, helped him kind of rebuild and regrow his paving company. We went from 4 million to about 14.5 million in about 6 years as the economy recovered, and we essentially, got rid of a lot of the old project management staff that were high salary and changed it to a commission-based structure, and brought in people from outside the industry and trained them. I never was able to become an owner of that company, which would have been great. But me being an entrepreneur, I actually had a couple clients that started reaching out to me, wanting me to go to different states to help them with some larger projects. So I found myself flying to Denver and to Seattle to look at these large industrial portfolios and help them out on some of these, $500,000, $1 million projects, these larger jobs. And so from that, I got out of the paving and concrete construction side of the business for a while and really focused on building this consulting company because there's a lot of these either regional or national property owners that really wanted to start streamlining a lot of their operations. And from there, we found owners throughout the country that had these one-off projects that they really needed help with. And so we started working with them as well. Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're working with people or companies, corporations, whatever, that own maybe multiple facilities or large facilities, and you kind of help them put together a plan of growth or maintenance, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So most of our clients are, publicly traded REITs, publicly owned companies on the stock market, or even private real estate investment trusts, or guys that are raising, 50 to $100 million to go out and buy assets, usually depreciated assets. And what we'll do is we'll come in and reevaluate the asset. For paving and concrete specifically, we'll take core samples of the asphalt to determine, what is the composition of the substrate and the subgrade, what the compaction ratios are, how thick the actual asphalt is, how long that's been around. Same thing with roofing. We'll take core samples of the roof, kind of evaluate leaks and things like that. So whatever they need, whatever big project they have on their plate, we'll come in and evaluate it. With that evaluation comes budgets and recommendations. We ask a lot of questions about their asset strategy, if they're planning on doing a refinance in a certain number of years, if they're going to sell it in a certain number of years, or if they're a long-term owner. We'll build those recommendations to their asset strategy. After that, once they've decided to move forward with the project, we'll actually write the bid package. That way, all the contractors are bidding off of the same scope of work. It's a true apples for apples bidding process, where we'll actually outline the entire process that we want to be used, even material specifications if we want to. Um, and then the last phase is we'll actually do the construction management as well. So that can vary from client to client, but asphalt projects, concrete projects, you can do a lot of work pretty fast. So we're usually there during the whole time. Roofing projects can take months, like on a big industrial site. You've got, 100,000 square feet. It could take 3 or 4 months to actually complete that. So we're not there every day. We're there maybe once every couple of weeks or once a month, depending on what the owner's requirement is or what their desire is for us to be there monitoring the work being done.
So I know we were talking earlier, and you were saying about finding these clients,
Mhm.
and the kind of the combination between associations and memberships for relationships, and even something as simple as LinkedIn, which is something I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of us use, and I'm probably guilty of that as well. Use correctly or maybe effectively.
Yeah, so when we decided to go full into the consulting world, I moved from Southern California to Northern Nevada here, just outside of Reno, between Reno and Lake Tahoe. And I left essentially my entire clientele base. All of my clients were in Southern California. And I used to listen to a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, goes by Gary V online. And he's written a couple books. And at the time, he was really talking about the organic reach that was still available on LinkedIn. And so I knew that one of the reasons we moved here, my business partners in Southern California, is we wanted to have more of like a West Coast and a national reach to work with clients because a lot of our clients that helped us start the company did have offices around the country. So I knew that I wouldn't be able to be there in front of them all the time. And so I started investing heavily. I started doing 1 hour a day. I just set it in my schedule. I'd go in. I learned how to use the search features to find people in a specific geographical region and with a specific job title that was uh, in my target market. And I would go on and I would connect with those folks. And then I would also try to post every day. I don't do that now currently, but I am still posting 2 or 3 times a week. And I would say 90% of my content is just educational content, things that I see that asset managers or property managers I think should know about either during the construction process or the bidding process, and how they could maybe do that a little bit better and teach them a little bit more about how that industry, paving, concrete, or roofing is run from a construction standpoint. So they have kind of that both sides of the fence look of how things are done. And question, really, I feel like teaching them the better questions to ask of their contractors in their area. Because I know not everyone's going to use us, but I feel like if they knew what questions to ask or what things to look for, they could be a little bit more successful in some of these larger projects. Um, the other way I've kind of grown businesses in the past in Southern California, when we took that company from 4 million to 14 million, we invested heavily in local commercial and HOA organizations. So for that area, a couple of big ones are BOMA, Building Owners Managers Association, IREM, Institute of Real Estate Management, CAI, which is the Community Association Institute, that's for HOAs. There's a couple apartment associations. So we found these organizations, and it was really most of the managers that were trying to network, or there's usually some certification process they can go to elevate themselves in the industry. So those managers seem like they were more inclined to deliver a better product, to do better at their job. They're educating themselves and doing continuing education on these items, so they can move up the ladder at their companies and get better jobs as well. So we wouldn't sponsor and invest, and I had the same philosophy there. I was on the educational. I got on committees. I've always told project managers that work for me to get on committees to give back to the organization, because if you just go to events here and there, you might meet a few people, but really getting involved in trying to bring the entire organization up and provide better content is really probably how I've done some of my best client development and relationship building.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't understand it. It's one of those situations where you're too busy to participate or to volunteer or to give that time, but really that's sales time. I mean, that's part of the sales process. And that's where you meet the people that are the most motivated and the most interested. Like you
Mhm.
said, it kind of puts you in a pre-filtered group of people who are active. And I think it's a good place to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've met like our first client at the consulting company was a former BOMA president, and now she's a partner at a big, like $15 billion company. And I just met her by showing up, just keep showing up. In my sales process, when I first got in the industry, I would you talk about time, right? Everyone has a certain amount of time, certain amount of energy they can give towards certain things, and there's a lot of wasted time, though. I think in any business or any life, and so I'm really good at scheduling, and so I'll schedule blocks of time. I usually try to schedule. I was always tried to keep my calendar full for 2 weeks at a time. So like meetings I'm scheduling this week are for the second week of April. I still kind of follow that because people can't usually meet that same week. And so I know I've got to get ahead of them a couple of weeks in order to get on their calendar. So I was always trying to schedule like 5 or 10 either calls, meetings, events per week that I could go to and get in front of people.
And it's funny because I can imagine that there's contractors listening to this and they're like, yeah, that sounds great, but when are you going to get all your work done?
Yeah.
How many hours in a day can you put towards something like this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm an early riser. I get up and do, exercise and get going pretty early. And so I will also schedule that blocks of time to go either look at projects or to actually put the proposals together. I also have found hiring good entry level people that can do some of the easier work, like making maps or getting material quotes and things like that, while you can go do the higher benefit, the higher paying roles, which is really getting in front of people. Um, then I've always hired and trained new people and brought them up and taught them those simpler things that maybe take my time but aren't worth as much money. And then that way they can kind of learn and get into the industry. And so I've used that philosophy a lot is one, time scheduling, time blocking. And then secondly, bringing someone new that can handle some of the more remedial tasks while they're learning, so that I don't get bogged down with those tasks and can spend more time in front of people.
So you must be a good delegator then, because that's a skill that is going to be required to do what you want to do.
Yes, you have to be. In order to be a good delegator, you have to be very clear about what you want and what your expectations are, and be willing to walk someone through that process, 4 or 5 times and let them fail. Be able to let them do the work. You've shown them 3 or 4 times now. Let them go ahead and give it a try. You don't have to babysit them. Hey, I tell my people, just do it, do your best, and then we'll go through it. So that way they can put the whole map together, put the proposal together, and then we'll go through it. And we'll say, okay, this is, I want to change this, I want to change that. And I find for myself and for others, learning by doing is better than learning by showing. You can show them a couple times, but even sometimes the first or second time, I'm letting them walk through the program, whatever program we're using to write proposals or whatever it is, walk through that process themselves and fail because then they'll learn how to do it the right way, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's a patience level thing that a lot of people don't have, or they feel like it's a waste of time. It's faster for me just to do it myself. I'm like, well, it is once, but it's not faster if you had to do it 100 times, and as opposed to being able to say, can you go do this for me 100 times? And having
Yeah.
that patience, and also I like what you're saying about letting them fail. There's nothing wrong with putting together a proposal incorrectly. Don't send it to the client,
Yeah.
but put it incorrectly because they may get it 70% right. Now you just have to show them or correct 30%, as opposed to I'll show you how to do 100% of it. It's like that, and you do learn from your mistakes. Well, you should learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
you
Most
know,
people do, I find, in the right environment, where they feel like they're not bad, wrong, or broken for failing. It's like, no, no, I don't expect you to know how to do all this. It's your first, 4 or 5 months on the job. I find it takes about a year. That year mark, people really, I find, can start to get to that 80-90% accuracy rate. And then by 2 years, they should really be almost self-sufficient in my experience. It takes about two fully, so it's a commitment too. And I think finding those people, learning the interview questions about who they are, what their motivations are, what makes them tick, is really important because you want to tap into what motivates people during. Not everyone's motivated by money. I find that more and more. A lot of people are motivated by time off. A lot of people are motivated, from flexibility in their schedules, things like that. And so if we can find the people that have the right core values and core skill sets that can be taught. It can, it, everyone's teachable, I think, as long as they have the right attitude.
Yeah, I think that's and I believe people do miss that. It's, and that a lot of times it comes from impatience. You hire too fast. You're like, I need somebody right now. I need them really bad because I'm overwhelmed. So I'm going to make a bad hire because I can
Mhm.
check that box today. But what you don't realize is now you're going to have to uncheck that box in 3 weeks, and then you're going to go through the whole process all over again, and you're kind of upset about it. You've wasted all of that time you put into that wrong person.
I completely agree. And I would add, what we've learned in the last few years is really dialing in our processes and making sure that everyone is doing these things the same way. That way, if someone's out, you've got, a fallback, you've got someone that can cover for them. But then it makes that teaching process much simpler when you have all your templates together, you have all your processes dialed in. It makes that teaching, and then we have a document that someone can refer to. So that if you're not there, like I travel a lot for work, right? And I'm like, hey, if you have questions, look at the template. We have this document that goes with the template. It takes time to put those together, but the value in them being able to walk through that as best they can when you're not around, again, gets you to that point where, okay, it's not perfect, but I can spend half an hour making adjustments versus 2 or 3 hours writing the whole thing myself. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think that's, and a lot of times in our coaching business, we'll come back to them and say, hey, look, we need to document this process. We need to get it in here. And then we'll go back to the client later and like, well, we had this big mess up. I'm like, well, what happened? And they tell me everything about what happened. I'm like, well, was it a process problem? I mean, did you go back? Did they follow the process?
Mhm.
Well, we didn't really, so you got to go back to it. And then
Yeah.
when you make a mistake, determine, is it a process problem or is it a person problem? Person problems, that's a different approach. Process, okay, we found out we didn't have it just right. Okay, did you update it? Did you fix it? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, you got a known reason for a problem and you're choosing not to correct it. It's like, just so it's bound to happen again. Processes will repeat no matter what.
Absolutely. And we take screenshots. We did this like 2 or 3 years ago. We just walked through it and took screenshots. We walked through every single bit of the process. And when we bring new people on now, that's our, and it's not perfect. Nothing is, things change. We implement something new, but you've got to go back and update them. And we always have this thing is hard on the process, easy on the person, right? Take care. If it is a process thing, then let's. And then from a personnel standpoint, something else we believe in is, you praise in public, you correct in private. And so if there's something that's not wrong there, that's a good opportunity to connect with that person one on one and say, hey, not to put them on blast, as some might say, in front of everyone, but there's an opportunity there. And I started probably about a year and a half ago. I started doing like weekly one-on-one calls with key people in my organization, and sometimes it's half an hour, sometimes it's an hour, and we help. Sometimes we talk about personal stuff and how it can help them, buy a home or things of that nature, things that they can learn. And a lot of times it is about, hey, these are a couple of things I noticed in some of your emails and then some of your reports that you've done. Let's work on this so we can get it up to the level that we wanted at and maybe even higher. So those are a couple of things I've learned early in my career and then tried to those sayings that remind me of how we can best proceed forward.
Yeah, they're great. They're great sayings and they're memorable because they're true, and they just apply
Uh-huh.
to all the things that you're doing. And I think when people hear document a process, they back away and like I don't have time for that. That doesn't mean that you've got a 50-page manual.
Hmm.
Sometimes a documented process can be a flow chart. It can be a checklist. It can be a Loom video. I mean, for goodness, it's just
Absolutely.
like, hey, here's a video of me doing it. Okay, we'll write down all the steps and we'll create this. But for now, here's a Loom video. So If you can't get a hold of me, just watch the video and do what I did.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah, I
sometimes
thought
with
about
me,
the video.
sometimes with me, it's watch the video and don't do that. So there's those kind of videos out there too. So
Yeah, I've thought about the video, haven't done that, but ours isn't long. Like we write reports that are usually 10 to 15 pages with pictures and stuff like that, but our process document is maybe 4 or 5 pages. We try to make it as simple and easy as possible with screenshots so that people don't get lost, but it does take time. And so we have in the past have implemented some major changes like switching from Microsoft to G Drive and implementing these standard operating procedures and having these documents. And so we found like for us, construction slow time is in the winter. We're not quite as busy, and so we know that from Thanksgiving to the end of the year, maybe the first few weeks of January are a little bit slower. And so we'll hold off on doing those things, but we'll keep them, on the checklist, knowing that when Thanksgiving comes around, okay, what are the 1 or 2 things we could work on over this next month that would have the biggest impact to our business? And then we'll assign roles. Okay, like I took one process. We had everybody in the company take a process and really write through it, and then we each read each other's process and made edits. And we gave each other, hey, all I'm asking you to do is spend like 3 or 4 hours a week on this, whether that's all in one time block or you want to work on an hour a day, but have this ready, in 2 weeks, so that we can all review it and look at it. And that, so we knowing that for us, yeah, I don't have time for that April through Thanksgiving, honestly, because we're so busy managing projects around the country that that we have to designate time in our cyclical cycle to implement these things. And that way, if there's any glitches or something goes wrong, we've got a little bit of time to work through those bugs before we get really busy again. And that's when we hire too. We hire during those periods as well because we're so busy the rest of the year that we don't have time to train people. Come June or July, we're so slammed with work that we just don't have time to really spend the one-on-one time with people to train them. So we'll hire people in November, in December, and January, so that we've got a few months to train them and implement them into our processes before they really get busy and are kind of on their own for a little while.
I think that, man, that's the knowledge that we look for in an interview like this because you know people don't do that. You don't hire when you're slow. That sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like a crazy idea, but it is. It's the lull period, and you've got contracts are going to be funding these people. But what a smart use of time. I think that's an exceptional idea because it just makes sense. I mean, this is the time we can review our processes while we're reviewing them. Let's train people on them. I mean, that's a great
Mhm.
idea.
Yeah, it's been super helpful for us. I think as a business owner, just understanding your cyclical cycle, right? Understanding your cyclical cash flow, especially in construction. Most construction is cyclical. So I think that understanding what that looks like uh, allows you to hire, maybe you don't hire in November because December and January, but you can start to look in November and December, hopefully find the right person in January, February before things really get ramped up. They've got a month or two to get involved before things get really ramped up. And that's usually when the cash flow starts to click in too, or what we've done in the past is knowing that what that cash flow increase is needed. And so we always try to have 3 months of payroll in our account at all times for that reason. And so we'll know that, okay, if we're going to hire someone and that's going to be an extra, $5,000 or $6,000 a month in overhead, we'll build that into our reserves, October, November, December, as we get towards the end of the year, we'll start putting that extra money aside so that come January, we've got the 3 months, including that new person, kind of set aside because you don't need the whole year's worth of payroll in the bank, but it's nice to have that 2, 3 months of cushion in case things get slow and you still got to pay people and you're investing in them. So that's kind of some things we've done from a cash flow perspective to understand when we can hire and make it make sense.
Man, if you're thinking that much about your own business, I got to think as a consultant, you're thinking awfully hard about other people's buildings and companies too. So I explains why
It's
you're
my nerd.
doing. That's right. You know, well, that is excellent, man. I tell you, John, this has been great. That is that's just a great way to kind of forecast things out and be planning ahead. I mean, that's a lot of forward looking, but it does pay off. So yeah, doing that and setting aside block time. I'm a huge fan of block scheduling. I think it's stay in one groove and ride that groove until it's kind of like one of those things. It's like, I don't really want to do this, but I can do it for the next 45 minutes, and then I know I'm done for the day. That's a good way to get out of it.
One thing block scheduling, I think people I've come across in business, struggle, you get in the groove and you feel like you're just working, working and working. And I build my vacations with that in mind, knowing that I can work hard for 2, 3, 4 months, even if it's just a long weekend, or if I'm actually taking a week off. I can do that, I have found for myself, and stick to it, knowing that I'm going to get a break and I can stay in that groove and I can grind it out and do the things that aren't, fun parts of the business, knowing that I've got a vacation coming up. And do that with the fall, with the winter too, because I can, from 4th of July until Thanksgiving is really like, that's our go, 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 I would say, time. But I know that come Thanksgiving, it's going to start slowing down. I can usually take 2 weeks off at Christmas. I can go skiing or snowboarding with my family and take some time off. But I will truly set that side of time. I think some folks, they actually don't take the time off. They don't take the time to reset and get their mind, clear and focus on, I think, what's more important in life, which is our family and friends and our personal health. And when we do that, though, I find every single time I come back and I'm excited. I'm like, okay, what's next, right? What's next on the list?
Yeah, I mean, that's why they call it making a living. You're not supposed to be out there living at work.
That's right.
Well,
there's seasons in life, I think, where you got to do that, but it's not always.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be there's crunch times, and then there's times when you're going to be able to relax, and you can plan and plan and plan, but sometimes things are going to catch you off guard, and that's okay. That's right. Just life in and of itself, anyway.
Absolutely.
Oh man, this has been terrific. Scott, I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about it. I feel like I'm being called out a little bit. I better go get some time logged in on LinkedIn. I'm like, doing that appropriately.
Yeah, find me. That's where most people I connect with. Scott G. Jolly on the LinkedIn site. Yeah, I love connecting there. I've got about 8,000, a little over 8,000 connections and followers now, which isn't, like, I think, huge by any means, but I'll get 3 or 4 leads a week sometimes. I'd say 5 or 10 a month, pretty much guaranteed.
Wow. Yeah, and that's easy. I mean, it's I mean, it's just, they're out there, and you build trust with them, and then, like, hey, I'm going to work with people that I know and I trust.
Yeah. And the closing ratio is much higher for new clients that come in on that. It's like 30 to 50% of people that reach out and say, I've got this job, could you come help me? That I end up working with, because they've spent weeks or months following me on LinkedIn, and they're like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. You know what I mean? So it is useful.
It's a warm lead before you've ever talked to them. They've
absolutely
already they've been conversing with you for months, though you didn't know it.
That's absolutely awesome. Yep.
Well, Scott, I appreciate it, man. I'm going to hit you up for that spare bedroom here when the ski season kicks back in.
Absolutely.
See how it goes.
That'd be great, man.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Get the Intel. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.